Hello, everyone, and welcome to Verto's May webinar, where we are going to be talking about the lack of access and visibility to data throughout an organisation. We'll be delving into why this is a problem and what you can do about it. My name is Laura Watts. I am Verto's marketing manager, and I'd like to thank you all for spending the next 45 minutes to an hour with us today discussing this, because it is an issue that actually all of us really do know about, but it never seems to be a priority for enough people at the same time to fix it. So what we want to do today is help to jolt this topic to the top of your priority lists for you all to change and make it as simple as possible to do so. Before we begin, please note that, as always, yes, this webinar is being recorded. It will be available for you to rewatch and send to those who couldn't make the live session today. You'll find that recording on our website and on our YouTube channel after we've finished. Give us a day or two for that. That should be there then. But I'm going to make it also really easy for all of you on the call today, and I will send you a link on email. The Q&A, it should be open throughout the session, so please do place any questions that you have into that Q&A box onto your screen throughout the session. You can do it any time from now, so that others can upvote what they see and what they would like to know more about. So first of all, I'm going to hand quickly over to my co-hosts, who will be talking you through the bulk of today's session. If you guys could introduce yourselves, and then I'll jump back to talk through the agenda. So Tasha, do you want to go first?
Yes, I'd love to go first. So I'm Tasha Osborne, Head of Client Success here at Verto. I've worked in project program portfolio management for more than 12 years. I started off in the financial sector, the private sector, and more recently have spent a lot of time working with all of you in the public sector as well. I lead the team of client success managers here at Verto, and we're really here to ensure that Verto is delivering the best strategic value for you. Craig?
Thanks, Tasha. My name's Craig Dixon. I'm a solution specialist here at Verto. Been here 7 years this month. Time does fly. Previously worked in the public sector in a variety of PPM roles. My primary role is to have meaningful conversations with organisations that are interested in elevating, enhancing and improving their approach to PPM in their organisations. So in a nutshell, Laura, that's me.
Lovely. Thank you so much, both. That's really great. Now, if you could flip to the agenda slide, Craig. We're going to have a look at what we're going to cover in today's session. First up, we're going to provide a run through of the challenges faced when there is a notable gap in data visibility. And then we're going to move on to why this happens within organisations typically. Next up, we're going to spend some time on governance and why it's vital to get your house in order to try and close that gap. Then to some practical and, most importantly, achievable actions to take for and who those will ultimately benefit. Finally, before the Q&A, we're going to show you not only how we tackle this for our clients in Verto, but how central government have started to address this for their whole sector. And that is that.
I think this is what I'm going to be discussing today. So leaders are often not making data-driven decisions, and this isn't because they don't want to or that they can't. We all know it can be a challenge to make data-driven decisions if the data just isn't there, or if it's being held in disparate systems, in different places, and it's just not easily accessible. You can see here we're talking about reporting being, late or manually stitched together. What that means is essentially you've got a lack of real-time data reporting and analytics, meaning that you're always on the back foot. You're always like kind of one step behind when that data's coming in. It's taken a lot of time to pull all that information together. So essentially, instead of being able to pivot and make decisions and understand exactly where you need to focus time and attention, that time and attention that could be being used really beneficially is actually being used to pull together reporting that's not that useful by the time you get it. It's also really, really challenging when there isn't a single source of truth. So it's hard to make data insights if your information is being held in multiple places. Perhaps there's more than one version of it being held on multiple systems. Somebody's updated one system, but another reporting system hasn't been updated with the same information. And when those reports are being pulled together, that means that you might have out-of-date information, actually completely incorrect information, and that can lead to serious problems when you're looking at how do we drive things forward strategically, how do we make sure that we're achieving the organization's strategic objectives, any success pillars that you have set up, that kind of thing. So I think talking about strategic objectives as well, it's really, really challenging from, I see it quite a lot when I'm talking to senior leaders. That's what I do quite a lot in my day to day. And one of the main things that they're talking to me about is how do we make sure that all the data that we're collecting, that we're storing, is actually connected to our strategic objectives? How do we see where we're making progress against those? And where do we see problems and issues that are arising at lower levels that could actually really impact, those strategic objectives? It's really challenging to understand the actual progress that you're making if your data isn't in a reasonable position to allow you to do that. Craig, I don't know if you've got any thoughts or any insights or anything you'd like to add here.
I think it's just echoing the pain that senior leaders and teams face, where they get into a meeting, they need to make a decision, they've got lots of items on the agenda, and when they finally get to that point, they maybe have a thought on how they want to approach it, and then a curveball comes in and says, oh, by the way, there's been a change in the last week, this is now amplified, this has become a lot bigger, or oh, this has actually been resolved and it's something we don't need to worry about. And that lack of efficiency, that clunky approach that you get in those meetings when there's constant caveats and exceptions that have to be pulled on it. And I was in a meeting with a senior leadership team earlier this week from a local authority, and they said we're really good at collecting information, but we collect it in many different ways, and we're not really good at doing anything with it. And so that for them is one of the biggest challenges that they face. But no, I just wanted to echo that, and yeah, exactly right with what you've said from your side of things.
No, and actually, Craig, has really made me think of something there. So, we do run occasionally things like maturity assessments with our organizations when we're coming in, and often, actually, again, to echo what you've just said, data insights and analytics is very different from just being able to pull data out together. So actually being able to analyze it and use that data effectively to drive decision making, to drive prioritization, and to make sure that you're managing performance really well, that's a completely different thing. And if your data isn't in a reasonable position to allow you to do that, it can be really challenging.
Absolutely. There's another side to this coin. So we've spoken about senior leaders from that perspective, but the other side is something I've got a bit more of a connection to, and that's about the team side of things and the delivery elements. Oftentimes when you've got that gap in visibility, it's normally because there's multiple disparate systems in play. Having all those systems in play, teams working in silos, make it really, really difficult to get that visibility in play. And what that means is that teams are not being utilized effectively. They're being pulled left, right, and center. They're spending half of their working week joining meetings, providing updates, updating spreadsheets, PowerPoints, whatever that might be, in order to provide the insights that senior leaders need. And being told to use this template for this and that template for that can just, again, that clunky, inefficient feeling of right, where do I go for this, or where do I put that, or oh, okay, right, there's been a change. The senior leaders need to now view this information slightly differently. Oh, and that means another template, another way of working. Let's start again to get that information. And I think that the disparate systems piece is, for me, it's one of the foundations and one of the cruxes of the problem that you have with the visibility gap. And it leads to teams not being effective, and then it breeds a lot of manual processes in play that people just accept, and they don't realize how much of an impact it takes. And it's like, you do know that you're actually spending almost half of your working life just doing manual process that you could just pull away if you just took a step back and thought, how can we do this differently? How can we be efficient? But also, how can we be more adaptable? Because oftentimes senior leaders may require different angles of the data that they need, and that can be a really arduous task to actually provide that slightly varied management information layer to them. So there are two sides, and I think from a delivery team, it becomes really frustrating. You feel like you're doing a lot without getting much done out the other end, and that you're almost accepting of these manual processes instead of actually doing what you want to be doing, or what is your primary role in your job, right? Which is to be part of that PPM community, to manage and deliver on projects and programs, as opposed to arduous admin tasks.
And I think, Craig, I'd like to just add to that around, the visibility gap. And I think there's definitely one from a senior leadership point down, but there's also one from teams upwards. Something I think that we should be thinking about here as well is it's not just about senior leaders looking down, it's about teams looking up and understanding how the work that they're doing actually links to strategic objectives, makes a difference, is having a real impact on the organization. And I think sometimes being so lost in the weeds of pulling data together for a report can really lead to a lack of satisfaction in what they're doing. And I think that adds a real layer to what people get out of their everyday lives as well from a working perspective. So I think that's something important to call out. The better the data is in terms of linking up and understanding why it's beneficial can really help teams and project teams understand why what they're delivering is important.
Absolutely, it can be demoralizing, it can be deflating, it can really have an effect on the team's confidence level, and that obviously, as we know, has a knock-on effect on anything that you do. So the next thing we wanted to touch on is why data fragments in real organizations. There's multiple facets to this, but primarily it boils down to two core areas, and it's what we touched on before. So the data's living in multiple tools. Oftentimes it's because teams are allowed or not prohibited from going out and getting their own tools and their own ways of working. So there's no set approach that says, look, if you want to do X, then this is what you should do. Or team one could go and use an Excel sheet for something, team two could go and do something in a PowerPoint, and it can be formatted totally different. And as I mentioned, it's one of those core pillars. By not having a consistent approach to how you do things, the tools that you use, data naturally becomes fragmented, it sits in different places, and just by nature of it being in different systems means the look and feel and the structure of it's going to be different. And that bleeds into the second point, which in terms of there being no consistent approach. There's no standardized governance in place, or there's very lack of formal governance. And if it is, it's not being followed. We've spoken with organizations recently who say that a fraction of their projects actually follow due governance process, and the rest just fly by and land in delivery, and there's no consistent approach. So that for me are two of the big reasons why you see data fragmenting: a lack of agreement in terms of the tools, the structures, and then a lack of standardization. How are we going to do this? What terminology do we use? Even down to terminology can be quite frustrating and challenging. If people are using different terms for the same things, it can start to be confusing, and that then leads to the problem with being able to aggregate it up. And the final point here is about the information being pulled together manually in those manual processes. If we can address those two core pillars and some of the other pieces as well that we'll speak about, you can hopefully move away from the manual process, the arduous tasks, and streamline that data flow so that it gets up to the people that need it when they need it, and we know it's timely, it's accurate, and it's all they need to be able to make those better, more informed decisions. Tasha, is there anything around those points that you think I've missed or is worth adding to?
I think it's worth noting that even if you have a standard methodology, a governance framework in place in an organization, it doesn't mean that people are always following it. And I think that as a change management is one of my big things here, but it's about bringing your people along with you. If you've got those kind of standard methodology, standard governance approaches in place, understand how your teams are using them. Because if people are using them differently, even if you're using the same terminology, the same frameworks, that doesn't mean that your data isn't going to be fragmented, because people might be approaching it differently. People might have taken a different view on how that governance is supposed to be followed and adhered to. So I think it's just worth also noting about the impacts of making sure that you understand the people that you're working with, the teams that you're working with, how they're going to interpret and approach those different areas.
100%. They need a compelling reason to change, but also what you'll find is that you'll adopt those governance processes, and then if you actually go to the teams on the ground, they might have their own ways of doing things, and then they transition that into the way they've been told to do it, shadow IT, if you will, where they do things in their own way and then manually pull it together. And even if they are eventually getting to that point where they're adhering to governance, they're still not being efficient and effective. There's still a lot of time wasted and manual process doing that because they're not comfortable or they don't know why they're being told to do things in a certain way. So they revert to type and go back to what they're used to doing. Next up, we'd like to bring you guys in from a poll perspective. So Laura.
Yeah, that's it. So a little bit of audience participation. We love this. So I'm going to just load up the poll now and hoping that we have got some senior leaders on the call today. But even if we don't, if you could all just have a look at this question and pick your preferred answer in the next couple of moments, that would be great. So what do you think from your perspective, what's the biggest barrier to reliable leadership reporting today?
Should have had a countdown theme tune, Laura, for this.
Yeah, we should have done, shouldn't we? I can see some are coming in. And I'll just leave it a couple more seconds. All right, I'm not sure if we can see this, but can you guys see this? Oh, no, it's still coming in. Lovely. All right, well, let's leave it there. Thank you all for doing that. We did actually have a bit of a chat ahead of this call, ahead of the webinar, as to what might be the most popular answer to this, and it seems that we were right. So there we go. Right, well, let's move on anyway. What I'll do is I'll make sure to include those poll results in the post-webinar email, so you'll be able to sort of dissect yourselves when you read that email. Thanks very much.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. It's fascinating. I don't think there's a wrong answer here, right? But you can clearly see the manual process, the inconsistencies is one of the biggest factors, followed by that data being disparate and all over the place. So they're almost intertwined. So that's interesting, and it was what I was expecting based on the conversations we have, to be fair.
Yeah.
So how can we start to make a change? I really do think that governance is the foundation of this, and by getting your house in order, or by improving the governance approach and consistency in the organization wherever possible, it goes a long way to being able to close that visibility gap. If we can standardize approaches, if we can have consistency in what we do across teams, it becomes a lot easier to pull that data up the chain autonomously, to be able to get that data visible in front of the people that need to see it, whether it be program teams, portfolio teams, or senior management. Without that standardized governance, without that repeatable best practice process, as we mentioned, things are going to be done differently, things are not going to be consistent, and you're never going to be able to seamlessly aggregate that data up without a lot of manual intervention and tweaking every single time. Even if it's the same approach each month, you're having to do the same repetitive process every single time. By removing that subjectivity and having that agreed standards, everyone knows what's going on. When you open a business case, everyone knows what that looks like. When you're doing aggregated reporting across a portfolio, everyone knows what the terminologies are, what's being said on every page, instead of trying to interpret what that particular manager or leader meant when they put that information into that report. And also by having that clear structure and hierarchy and golden thread from the work that we're actually doing up to align into those strategic objectives and goals from the organization. Having a clear picture where everything starts and where it ends, and where the responsibility and accountability is really important, and it makes that process seamless. And getting that balance between real time and near time. You will never achieve real-time reporting and management information if the data is disparate, if there's a lack of standardization in the organization. But if you can standardize that, then you can set things up, bring the right tools in to give you that real-time data that makes it a lot easier to make more informed, confident decisions, instead of always looking over your shoulder. Is this really the true picture? Is this really where we're at? So those for me are really key, and there are tools that you can bring in to elevate this further. We'll talk about that as we go. But Tasha, I'm sure you've got something to add on the governance side of things. It's quite a big topic.
Governance is a really interesting topic for me. I never thought I'd hear myself say that, but there we are. So when I'm talking to senior leaders, I spend a lot of time, as I said, talking to senior leaders as part of the role that we have here at Verto. And actually, I think what's really important to talk about here is the role of senior leaders in governance, because we all know that sometimes things just happen, and as senior leaders you have to respond. And prioritization is a great example of this. There might be a full prioritization process, everyone's following the same processes, everyone's doing the same things, and then something comes in at a senior level and you have to make a decision that takes priority. Something I think is really important to understand is we should be setting examples as senior leaders of the best way to make things work. And I'm not saying that you have to go through the full prioritization process and follow all those steps, but think about what you can do to make it add more clarity, more visibility to your teams about why you're doing it. Maybe think about putting in place a parachuting kind of process that's not your full process, but allows you to, and this is really old school terminology, sorry, but parachute projects in, or, you know, high priority things in that have to take precedence over things that are already being worked on. Because actually, as senior leaders, if we respect and follow governance processes that we've put in place, that's going to bring the rest of the business along with us. And it's something that I talk about an awful lot, actually, is around how, yes, as senior leaders, we sometimes just have to get things done and we have to just make things happen. But actually, we can do that in a way that is respectful of the rest of the people that are working for us and supporting us in achieving our goals from a strategic point of view.
100%. And this also connects, as it all does, to change and adoption, right? It's all well and good trying to get your house in order, but if the people in the house don't know why you're doing this and what the purpose is, not only what it benefits to them, but how it benefits the organization, you're going to struggle to get that uptake, and the problems that we spoke about before are going to come back and creep back into the frame. So managing that change, like you say, leading from the front, from the top, but also bringing governance to life. I don't know how many times I've seen it before with teams where they're like, I know we've got a process. Every other week or every few weeks I dip back into a 50-page PDF and I'm now on page 25, and this is what I now need to do at this step. Bringing it to life, bringing it together in one place in a platform can really help adoption and really reduce that barrier to entry and make it feel a lot more comfortable for people to follow. So what do we do and who benefits? I think we'll start with the actions, Tasha.
Great. Okay. I've got quite a lot to say here, so be patient with me. But the first one there is talking about your minimum consistent data set. And for me, this is absolutely key. You really need to decide what information is actually really important. Having a clear kind of standard data set makes the project professionals that are delivering these projects for you, it makes their life so much easier. Everything else around the outside of it is noise. Something that we say really clearly when we're talking to clients is it needed to make decisions? Is it needed to drive reporting and analytics? And is it needed to actually manage the project, the program, or the portfolio? If it isn't, we don't need to record it. It's just noise. It's just going to make things more complicated, and it's not going to add any benefit to you. So really understanding what your minimum viable data set is that's still going to give you the right information to drive decision making, but isn't going to be a burden on the people who are having to record that information. People are always going to add the minimum data that you need, but having it being too complicated, too challenging, and too time consuming can actually lead to more frustration, inconsistent, application of that, people not adding in the right information because they just need to get something in there. And it means actually you don't get right down to the heart of the information that you need. So I think that that's really vital. Something else that I've just talked about, but I'm going to say it again, clear governance and definitions. We obviously just talked about that. And I think having simple governance processes in place is really important. If you make your governance processes too complicated, having a methodology that's, got 8, 9, 10 different stages in a life cycle, having really challenging ways to record and understand risk, having difficult things that people have to really understand and spend time thinking about, can actually lead to people actually spending less time doing the important stuff, actually running the project, delivering the change, talking to people, getting things done, because they're so busy focusing on that governance. So I think the simpler, the better. Having a tool that can really support you and guide you in that can be really helpful. And as I just said, and I will say again, as senior leaders, follow your own governance processes, lead by example, and the rest of the business will come with you. If people see that senior leadership are following the governance, following the methodologies, following the processes that are in place to a point, they're going to be much more inclined to think this is the way we do things here. It's clear, everyone works in the same way, we're all coordinated, we're all working to the same goal. And that's really, I think it's vital, actually, to do that. Connecting data across levels. So in terms of connecting data across levels, Craig talked about it, being able to link your data so that you can see what activities at lower project level are actually going to have a real impact to your portfolio objectives or even your strategic objectives as an organization, it puts you miles ahead of the game. It's a real advantage as senior leaders to be able to drill down into there are activities in this project down here that are actually going to impact whether we hit this strategic objective today or not. That puts you miles ahead of everyone else. And actually the way that you connect your data and set your data up and get everyone in the organization working together in a consistent way is going to put you into that position where instead of being reactive and looking at things after they've happened, trying to pivot and make changes on the back foot all the time, you're going to be in a place where you're more proactive, having really clear oversight of what's going on across portfolios, programs, and even from a strategic organizational perspective, being able to visualize everything from that top layer all the way down. And that all links back to data, the visibility gap. And if we can address that, you're instantly going to be in a position where you're miles ahead of the game. And that kind of links to that moving to live connected views. I think there's quite a lot of discussion, and we're hearing a lot of discussion at the moment around real time versus near time reporting. Okay. And having live data access is a huge advantage. And I think as senior leaders, sometimes it's easier to just think, the traditional reporting works for me. I get something sent across to me, I can look at it ahead of the meeting, and then I'm ready, I'm prepared, and I can do it in my own time. But I think we need to step back and say, actually, let's not be wary of moving towards a less traditional way of reporting as well. You know, looking at live data views, being able to log into something and see a dashboard that you can immediately drill down into issues, looking at, you know, key things that are going to affect you alongside the more traditional reporting means that you're actually in a place where you can be prepared for a session. And then if something comes up in that meeting, that something's changed in the last couple of days, Craig mentioned that earlier, and I know from experience that happens quite a lot, you're actually in a position where, as well as having that prep time, being able to look at that, you can quickly look at that data, drill down, understand, well, what's happened? What are we doing to address it? Do we need to move resource from something over here to something over there? And it allows you that flexibility to just make those decisions in a much better way. And obviously having data in a single place rather than relying on people manually pulling it into you know, from Excel, from different spreadsheets, from different systems, that's going to put you in advantage as well. It's quicker, it's more efficient. People are wasting less time trying to remember, oh, it's this type of project, so I must put it here, or they have this data collected in this way, and I've got to remember how to log into that system so that I can add that data. It just takes time and energy and effort that people could be using elsewhere. So thank you, Craig. That was very timely. The benefits of this, you get that clear real-time visibility of what's happening. We've talked about that. Having that clear picture from a top-down level, from a bottom-up level, being able to drill down into key themes, for example, or strategic pillars, or key portfolios that you need to look at. That's a huge advantage as a senior leader. Eventually, it's going to lead to, you know, money saving, hitting those objectives, being able to think proactively, giving you the confidence to make those data-led decisions, and also in a timely way. I think, you know, in the more traditional way of having a report sent to you a month at the end of the month when everything's already happened, that's fine. And you can make some decisions off the back of that, but everything's already changed. So actually being able to do it really effectively means having the information right now about what's happening, what's going on, is really going to be beneficial. And that leads, of course, to being able to drill into risks, progress, dependencies. With more traditional reporting, when data is spread across different systems, there is that visibility problem where you don't really know, you know, that risk that you're looking at in a report from a month ago might have already turned into an issue. It might have already escalated, or it might have been closed. They might have been able to mitigate it. You're always dealing with data that's slightly out of date, which makes it slightly ineffective. And that, you know, can lead to prioritize, not being able to prioritize properly, not being able to, allocate your resources effectively in order to meet your objectives. So closing that visibility gap allows you to make better decisions, clearer prioritization, and more effective resource allocation as well.
Absolutely. Wasn't as timely there with the shift into the final point, but not too bad nonetheless. I'll give you a chance to take a breath, Tasha. So I think that there's also benefits for teams, not necessarily in order of magnitude or priority, but clarity on what's needed and when for me is really important, right? Teams know what they're doing, why they're doing, and what the outputs need to be. Having everything in one place that's easy to access not only benefits them, but it also means there's less time spent creating reports. Those reports can be created automatically from your daily working habits and how you're updating documentation live in one place. That then reduces duplication. Don't know how many times I've spoken to teams and they say, I have all of my information, I've got my project workbook, whatever that might be, and then by the way, I need to take this information, lift and shift it into another, add some commentary, add some words, and then there'll be some feedback and I'll make some changes. All of that can just be eliminated by not only setting the standards and providing clarity, but bringing everything under one roof in one place to allow that reporting cycle to happen. And it allows them to be more focused on actually delivering, doing what they're being paid to do in terms of being PPM professionals, as opposed to spending half of their working week, as we've mentioned before, being involved in the manual process and the arduous tasks that you need. And I think that's a key thing. And just to tie it back to some of the actions at the top, everything that we're asking of the teams need to serve a purpose, and therefore it should be lean and drive value. If it's not going to benefit senior leaders, help decisions and that side of things, and if it's not going to benefit the teams, i.e. bringing everything together in one place, making it clear, easy to understand, easy to follow, why are we doing it? But also being able to create the connections and that golden thread across the hierarchy is really important, because what that means is that reporting cycle can be automated and it can be standardized. So we've probably all been there where we have a spreadsheet that's a tracker for all the programs all the projects in a program. And unless you're the program manager, you're never going to be able to, at the drop of the hat, say, these are all the projects in a program. You're going to open up that spreadsheet. By being able to formulate those connections in the system, not only does it create clarity on accountability, what projects sit where, but that can also be the bedrock for automation and automating reporting based on those hierarchies. And you'll see an example in a couple of moments. Hopefully, Tasha, I've given you a chance to have a breather, have a drink. Is there anything you'd like to add before we move into the next slide?
No, I think we've covered everything between us. I think it's really important. Yeah.
So what we wanted to do as we sort of push towards the finish line is talk about what this potentially looks like when it works, and how it can be brought to life. So we spoke about data being fragmented. We've spoken about a lack of standardization. We spoke about setting the precedent for governance. We've also spoken about connecting layers. What does that look like in practice? How does that feel when you move away from that disparate system, spreadsheet and word shot document style environment? What you're seeing on the screen here is an example of that hierarchical structure, that portfolio to program to project being brought to life inside of a platform. You're going to have to watch it again because I accidentally pressed a button that I didn't mean to press. But what you can see is that those structures are really clear. They're really easy to understand, and this forms the foundation for aggregated reporting. And you can instantly see what projects are living where and where they're accountable from. On top of that as well, being able to set the standard for governance and process and bring life cycles to life. I like to call it project management on rails, is really important. So what you're seeing here is an example of a 5-stage process, but it's actually been brought to life live in a system. So you know exactly where things are at. We know as an organization what's going on in each one of these stages, and you can do things like set governance, gateways, approvals to make sure that you know when a project's in delivery, for example, all the boxes have been ticked, all the documents have been approved, it's gone to the right boards, and it can then progress on. What that also means is that from there, you've brought it into one place, it's really easy for people to follow. Governance documentation is automatically surfaced to the project team so they know what they're populating and when, but that then leads to addressing that visibility gap in the outputs that you're seeing here by being able to take all of that information and seamlessly pull it up to the surface. In order to get to this level of detail and clarity in the formal world, there'll be a lot of manual process, hours of multiple people's time to get there. But because we've set that tone, we've got everything in one place, we've got the structures and the governance established, we have that real-time visibility that Tasha's speaking about as being so important, and being able to drill down into the detail if you ever need to see more, figure out what's going on, and being able to zoom back out and see things from the surface again is really, really important. So we thought it was useful to just show you what the other side could look like when you start to move away from that manual process, that disparate systems, and that lack of standardized governance that hasn't been set. Tasha, anything you'd like to add on this?
I think you covered it all really well, actually, Craig. You've said everything I would have said. And I think from my perspective, just to add one thing, of course, I can't not add something. Just from my perspective and senior leader perspective, I think it can be quite challenging to think about logging into a system, looking at something in a system like this. But actually, I think if we try and flip it on its head and see it as potential opportunity to save us time, to be able to do it at our own pace. If we can log in and have a dashboard that's set up exactly what we need to see, we can click into what we need to see, rather than having to ask people, can you get me this data? I need it in this way. I need you, can you provide it to me this way? Actually being able to design this yourself, create what you need to look at, what you need to focus on, I think it can be a real advantage. And yes, it might take a little bit of time up front to think about how do I log in, what do I actually want to see, how do I want to set this up. But actually in the fuller advantages of time, it's going to be hugely beneficial.
Massively, you're right. Invest that time early on, and then it will pay back in spades on an ongoing basis.
Okay, I think this one's me as well, isn't it? Where we can see it working at the moment. So another advantage, of course, of having something more consistent, something more standardized, is that you can bring key regulations, key things that we have to follow into place much more easily. You're not having to worry about how, it's being done in this system, how it's being done in Word, how it's being done in Excel, whether that team is following it. Everyone is having to do things in the same way. And obviously a really key example of this, as you can see here, is the government project delivery standards. I think we actually had a recent webinar on that, which hopefully some of you attended as well. But actually being able to build that into a tool and then have people follow it and not worry about whether you're going to be able to meet those standards, because everyone is doing that as part of their day-to-day. It's embedded in their day-to-day working practices because it's part of the standard of the tooling that they're using. It's just a huge advantage for everyone. And of course, it's not on screen here, but given my background in financial services especially, we know that there are other regulatory standards, there are other regulations, there are other compliance regulations, for example. And the right tooling, the right system, you can build those standards in as well. You can build that compliance level, that the FCA, HMRC regulations, anything like that, you can build into the tool, you can build into into a tool, and actually know and have the confidence that your teams, your users are following those regulations, being compliant against any of those regulations that you need, and actually delivering against those standards. And you'll be able to actually actively evidence that as well. And I think that's really important.
Absolutely. No, it's really important. And also having process in place that's adaptable, right? We know that these processes, these approaches change sometimes at the drop of a hat, and being able to have a process and a system in place that can adapt easily to manage those quickly can be really important. We've had conversations where organizations have seen a change and there's been a 3 to 6 month cycle. Projects have been non-compliant for months on end. Some projects are just accepted that's going to wrap up non-compliant, and then we'll start from this cut-off point, I promise. But if you're able to be more adaptable, you can drastically reduce that route to compliance when things do change, and get to that point in a much quicker and better state. Tasha, anything to add on there before we pass back to Laura for some key takeaways?
No, I think we've covered everything.
Lovely.
Wonderful. Thank you, guys. It's always great to have you two on a webinar. You're so informative and insightful. So thank you. It's been wonderful. So I'm going to wrap up the presentation side of things here with the key takeaways, which as we know, it really comes down to these three things. The first one we've got here is visibility drives better decisions. Senior leaders just need confidence in the information that they're seeing, and that comes when data is visible and in real or near time and reflects what's actually happening across delivery teams and within the programs and the portfolios. And without that, they're shooting in the dark. So I hope that that's sort of come through loud and clear. Secondly, fragmented data creates unnecessary pressure on teams. So we spoke about this a lot. When information sits across disconnected tools, disparate tools, people spend a lot of their time chasing that data and trying to report on work rather than actually doing the work itself, delivering it. And then that is going to build pressure quite quickly, and that creates a huge risk across the organisation. So definitely a key one there. Finally, consistent governance is what turns fragmented data into actionable insight. Governance often sounds really heavy and very process driven, but actually when it works best, it's simple and it simply creates consistency. That's really at its core what it's there to do. And consistency is what makes visibility and reporting and confident decision making possible. So that is that from the presentation. I hope that those takeaways resonate. I hope everything resonates from today. Of course, we are always happy to jump on a call and talk about your specific case, what's happening with you and your specific organisation. So do reach out to us for anything that came up in the presentation today, anything that you'd like to delve further into. But on that note, that's the end of the presentation side of things. If you have any questions, now is the last opportunity. You'll have to add them to the Q&A. So please have a little look at that now and do add some in. There aren't any at the moment, which obviously means we've done a fantastic job explaining everything today. But I do have a few that often come out when we broach this topic with our clients. So I'm just going to ask a couple to you guys, if that's okay. The first one is, how do you approach improving visibility without teams feeling like they're suddenly being really micromanaged or over-governed?
I think I'm going to jump in here, Craig, if I may. Your change management is hugely important. So thinking about putting in a new system, for example, it's really key that you understand how people are working right now, where data is currently being stored, how people are managing in their day-to-day, and then helping them through that process. If you bring people along for the journey, you talk to people about how do you think we should be doing this? You're the experts, you're the people on the ground. Obviously, from a senior leadership perspective, we know what we need to get out. How best can you put that data in for us? What's the best way for you to do that? And actually, I think that's probably my strongest takeaway point there is it's all about bringing people along as part of that change journey. Think about your change management practices, your processes. You can put the best system in the world in, you could put the best governance processes in the world in. If you don't bring your people along with you, then it won't work. It will be ineffective and it won't work.
Absolutely. And I also think as part of that, it's about letting them know what's in it for them. This isn't all about just providing senior leadership with the information they need. It's about how it's going to benefit them and making sure they have an opportunity to contribute. Just being brought along, as Tasha said, goes a really long way to making people feel like they're being included. It's being done for the right reasons, and there's no alternative motive in play that's coming along the track in terms of what you mean by things like micromanagement or overgoverned. It's all about making sure that everyone has the tools to do their job effectively, and that's not policing, that's not micromanagement. It's about enabling and making everyone's life easier at the end of the day. But you're right, it all stems to change and bringing people along that journey. Without that, you're never gonna get there.
Yeah, absolutely. We have talked about this a lot. We need to talk about it even more, and definitely a webinar or a podcast or something on change management specifically, Tasha, is on the cards for sure with you.
Yep.
We do have, like I mentioned, we also host a podcast, and There is a question in the Q&A now about the webinar that we mentioned in the presentation. Is it available on the spotlights? Actually, Karen, thank you for your question. It's all available on our events and webinars page, which is on our website. It's also available on our YouTube channel, both of which I will link to in the email, so you'll have full sight of all of that. We host, from a marketing side, a webinar just like this one every single month. And we do the occasional podcast as well to sort of back up any findings or talk to external people in the industry or our clients. So all of this is I will link to on the email, so you'll be able to access it all. But interestingly, we did one, actually it was with you, Craig, early days, a podcast about explaining the why, which backs this point up really nicely. So like I say, we have spoken about this before. I will link to all of this in the email, and yeah, and there's always more to come. So that's where you'll find those. But yes, absolutely, it's about bringing those people on the journey, isn't it? You can't expect people to get passionate or to understand, and therefore to work with this government and governance and make the changes and improve that visibility without them understanding what they're doing in the first place. So the next question I have on my list is what's the biggest mistake organisations make when trying to improve leadership reporting and visibility? How can they trip up?
Multiple ways. I'll start on this one, Tasha, as you started on the last one, and it's sort of a cop out because it's playing back to what we said before. But they don't bring people along the journey, right? They push things down instead of making it a collaborative approach. But secondary to that is that they don't take feedback on board, or they don't create an open space for feedback to be brought into play, so that teams can feel comfortable pushing back, asking questions, challenging healthily what's going on, why are we doing this, have we thought about this or have we thought it that way. So I think in terms of that, and then the final point, more of a technical piece, is over engineering it. They overcomplicate it massively. They see 100 toys in the toy box and they pull 99 of them out when you probably don't need more than 10 or 15% as a starter for 10. And they often don't look as a minimum viable product, and that can lead to things like scope creep and asking of too much. Sometimes a bit of a lack of awareness in terms of what the ask is and what the effort is on the other side of that ask from the team. So three fronts, three pillars from my perspective. But Tasha, not sure if there's anything you wanted to add.
I would just add to that last pillar, something I was thinking about while you were talking, is often we're collecting data and we don't know what we're going to do with it. So it leads into that over engineering. You can create reports with as much data as you want, but if you don't actually know what you're looking to get out of that data, what decisions you're looking to make, how you want to use that data, you're just collecting data for data's sake. And I think that's a really big mistake, because it adds a lot of noise around what people are actually doing, why they're doing it. It doesn't create clarity in any way, because people are going, well, I'm putting loads of information in and I don't know why. I don't know where it's being used. I see no evidence of that data being used to drive any decisions. It just feels like a waste of my time. And I actually think the biggest thing that people can do is think about what decisions do we need to make and what data do we need to drive those decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, because people want to create impact, don't they? And if they're spending all of their time collecting data that's really not showing any impact at all, not driving any value, and it's not being presented in meetings or, explained back to them or linking to the strategic goals, even if they do have line of sight of that, it's going to be jarring for people, and it's going to put a lot of pressure on their desire to perform, isn't it? Yeah. Finally, last question from me then. A lot of organizations know that their data quality isn't perfect. Do you need perfect data for reporting to become useful?
No. Craig, I don't know whether you want to go first or I'll go first, but no is my kind of straight answer. I don't think it needs to be perfect.
It could actually be as short as that, Laura. No, it absolutely don't, and never will be. I mean, there's the I can't remember the exact phrase off the top of my head, but just go live, right? Just get it out. It is where you need to be. Data's never going to be perfect, and striving for perfection just means you end up cramping, you end up seizing, and you end up the inertia creeps in, and there's always something. Oh, we'll do it next month. Oh, we'll do it next month, and you never get it out. So, absolutely, it doesn't need to be perfect. It needs to be thought about, it needs to be considered, but then ultimately you just need to go, because you'll instantly start to see the benefits. It'll instantly start giving back, and you will pick things up as you go that think, oh yep, this needs to be tweaked, oh we're missing this actually that's really impeding our opportunity to make decision, or we need to actually inform our teams as to what we mean when we're asking for this sort of data, because their perception is different from our expectation. And so it can really start to highlight that you don't know what you don't know. When it's out there, you've got real life working information and data to deal with. So absolutely not. But I thought I'd add a bit more meat to those bones.
And I think just to finish that point, if it's okay, you talked about being able to learn from the data as you go. And I think that's a really key point. Reporting never stands still. It should be constantly evolving. We talk to our clients about this all the time. If you're not creating different reporting, new reporting regularly, then something's wrong. Because you as an organization should be evolving to meet anything that's coming in, any new, requirements, anything new objectives that you need to meet. And I think actually just going, as Craig said, is the best way to get to that. And be flexible. So when something isn't working, don't be afraid to get rid of it, as well as learning new things and bringing new things in. If something isn't effective, don't be afraid to say, we tried collecting that data. It's not actually quite what we need. Let's stop and let's start looking at what's actually going to be more effective.
I think that is good advice for not just the project management community. I could use a bit of that in marketing as well. Okay, well, that is it from me. There are no further questions on the Q&A. If there are any that you have, obviously reach out to us. But that brings our time today to an end, almost on time, which is fantastic. Thank you so much, all of you attending, for giving us your time today. Thank you, of course, to you, Craig and Tasha. It's been lovely, as always, and really great to talk about this important topic. As I said, do get in touch with us if you have any questions. Look out for the email coming to you, hopefully today, with the recorded session on it, plus links to all of the other bits and bobs we do from the marketing side of things. Also, I will include the poll results as mentioned. So I do hope you join us again for our next webinar, which will be held in June. Details of that will be up on the website soon. But other than that, thank you very much and goodbye.
Thanks all.
Thank you.